questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Après que Pékin
Beijing has interfered with 2 elections to help the Prime Minister. Beijing targeted several members of Parliament and threatened them. Beijing gave $140,000 to the Trudeau Foundation to influence the Prime Minister. And now, the Prime Minister finally appointed a special rapporteur to look into it, but he was actually another member of the Trudeau Foundation and a friend of the Prime Minister. And he's now trying to cover up the truth. Will the Prime Minister finally fire the rapporteur and start a public inquiry? The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the only person here who's trying to cover up the truth seems to be the Leader of the Opposition himself. When he was offered the opportunity to look at sensitive documents that the Special Rapporteur used to reach the conclusions that were made public last week, when that was offered to him, the Leader of the Opposition refused because he prefers to play politics about an issue that affects Canadian democracy. It's in the interest of all members of the House of Commons to support measures that will strengthen our democratic institutions.
Opposition.
No, what I refused is to be silenced. I will not be. The government will not pull me into a room, stamp public documents secret, and then tell me I can't speak, because we need to speak about the fact that Beijing interfered to help the Prime Minister in 2 successive elections, that Beijing threatened members of Parliament to try and win influence, and that Beijing gave $140,000 to the Trudeau Foundation to buy the favor of this Prime Minister. And then he names a former member of the Trudeau Foundation and a ski buddy to look into the matter, who has now only tried to cover it up. Will he fire this fake rapporteur and call a public inquiry now?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Speaker, it is the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada who is silencing himself by refusing to take the briefings. It is the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada who is covering his own eyes from the same information that Mr. Johnston had access to, which other non-partisan professional public servants had access to, and it leaves Canadians wondering why. Is it because he would rather play partisan games than do the hard work? I think we know the answer to that question, and it's yes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you don't need a fake briefing or a secret stamp to know what the documents that have already been quoted verbatim in the media because of leaks by a seriously distressed security agency that is trying to expose what has gone on behind the scenes. We now know what is surreal. There are at least 2 police stations run by Beijing, a foreign dictatorship in Canada. That minister said they were closed. Now we find out that not only are they open, but they got tax dollars from this government. Will they shut the police stations and call a public inquiry?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Speaker, the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada is sinking in the quicksand of his own logic, calling briefings fake. What does he think that the public servants who work in the security establishment have been doing other than advising the government on how we can protect the people who defend our democracy every day? If he's serious about it, he will take the briefings, roll up his sleeves, sit at the table, and help us defend our democracy from foreign interference.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What do I think that the public service at CSIS have been doing? I know what they've been doing. They've been picking up the phone and calling the media to blow the whistle on the cover-up on this side of the House of Commons. Ils ont prouvé qu'il y a au moins...
They have shown that there are at least 2 police stations that are still open and that received taxpayer money. Not Canadian police stations, but Beijing police stations. Mr. Speaker, will this government finally close down these police stations and start a public inquiry? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, it is the leader of the Conservative Party who wants to close his eyes to the information.
Work with the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada to make sure that he has access to the same classified information that Mr. Johnston had, that the two panels who verified the integrity of 2019 and 2021 had, that NCCOP will have, that NSIR will have, and it is him and him alone who refuses to take this issue seriously because he refuses to take the brief.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I refuse to be silenced, Mr. Speaker. Unlike other members of the government, the tradition in this place is that opposition members can pose questions to any member of the government. So my question is to the Leader of the NDP. He has said that he wants a public inquiry. Well, now's the time for him to prove it. Yep. Will the member for leading the NDP state clearly now that either the government calls a public inquiry or he breaks off his coalition?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we've watched as a party that once recognized David Johnston as one of the most outstanding.
I'm going to interrupt and ask that the Honourable Minister start over. It just got noisy all of a sudden. I'm not sure exactly what happened, and so I'll ask everyone to take a deep breath. Please restart.
Mr. Speaker, what we've watched is the party opposite, who once recognized David Johnston as not only an outstanding Canadian, but it's somebody worthy of being Governor General of this country, appointed under Stephen Harper, that now, because his report doesn't conform with their politics, it doesn't conform with their political interests, that they're attacking and maligning his character. And this is part, Mr. Speaker, of a pattern of the party opposite, which they are more interested in politics, they are more interested in making partisan points than they are in the facts on the ground. There is not a member of this House who does not stand strongly and firmly in support of democracy and against those.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, let's not mince words. David Johnston's report on Chinese interference is a farce. No one accepts it except the Prime Minister and China, which must be very pleased. We should not let the Prime Minister get away without a public inquiry. Because not to have a public inquiry means that there will be no inquiry on threats to elected officials, no inquiry about the Trudeau Foundation, or on the intimidation suffered by the Chinese diaspora, or about the 11 candidates that were supported by Beijing. This masquerade is just protecting the Prime Minister. When will there finally be a public, independent public inquiry? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, I would encourage the Leader of the Bloc Québécois to accept the government's offer to bring the Bloc Québécois up to date on all of the sensitive and detailed information that Mr. Johnston and the Committee of Parliamentarians that includes representatives of the Bloc Québécois and other opposition parties, that all of them saw. They all looked at this intelligence and the facts. And I'd encourage the Leader of the Bloc Québécois to do the same thing before putting forward partisan remarks. This is a serious matter and deserves a serious reaction. I hear some very clear, very distinct voices that can be recognized in the House. I'm sure they wouldn't want to be named publicly.
Both languages, I might say, that's very Canadian, but it's still not parliamentary. So I'm sure the honourable members don't want me to name them. So we'll just go on to the next question. L'honorable député de la Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, this report's only goal is to protect the Prime Minister, not to cast light on Chinese interference. That's why no one has changed their mind about the fact that we need a public inquiry. Both Quebecers and Canadians are asking for that inquiry. The polls are clear. This report has just been published to help the Prime Minister. It's been published by a man chosen by the Prime Minister. That's not what people in this House want. So I will say that the Bloc Québécois will be insisting every day until the Prime Minister launches the inquiry. Does he understand that he can't get away as easily as all that? The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I would invite my colleague for La Prairie to speak to the leader of his party and take advantage of this government's serious offer to share sensitive information, so that the Leader of the Bloc Québécois and his colleague on the committee of parliamentarians responsible for closely examining this very matter, I'd encourage the leader of the Bloc Québécois to look at the facts that David Johnston and the committee used to reach their conclusions. Mr. Speaker, I think that's the very least serious action we could ask for from the Bloc Québécois on such an important matter.